Okay, it's now actually 6 o'clock on the dot in South Africa. So we shall officially begin this book launch of Sharon's, and we'll try to ignore all the bebops. So on behalf of Sharon and I'd like to welcome you very warmly to this book launch. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Delia. I'm Sharon's partner, aka Dearly Beloved. If you read the book, you'll see a reference to me as that from time to time. And before we get started, I'm going to ask Michelle, who's on my screen down there, to run through all the tech basics. Over to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Delia. So just a couple of tech basics. We'd like to ask all of you to keep yourselves on mute, just for, to eliminate any background noise. So if you could, and if by any chance you forget to put yourselves on mute, I will mute you. So just to know, if you suddenly go on mute, it's me. And then also, if you could keep, when we start, if everyone could put their cameras off, just because it takes a little bit of extra bandwidth. So just to make sure that we've got good signal. When we start, if you could all put your cameras off. And then for the best view, at the top right-hand side, I mean, a lot of you are very familiar with Zoom, but if you're not, on the right-hand side at the top, to click on speaker view. So when Sharon or Sylvia speaks, or whoever speaks, they will be the main person that shows up on your screen, rather than lots of different little squares. So I don't know if everyone can see. If it says speaker view, click on that. And it's a bit confusing because sometimes if you see gallery view, it looks like you're on gallery view. But if at the top right-hand side of the page it says gallery view, it means you're on speaker view. So, just one more thing, if you drop off the call for whatever reason, if there's a tech issue, you can just come back on with the same link and you'll come straight back into the meeting. I think that's it.
Great. I'm not on mute, am I? No. Thanks very much, Michelle. Okay, so now we're going to, before we go into the conversation, before I introduce Sylvia, I don't know, why am I seeing Michelle on my screen? Should I not be seeing myself, or does that not matter? Does that not happen?
Are you on speaker view?
I'm on speaker view, and I'm speaking, but I see that you're still on my screen, but that doesn't matter.
We've seen you.
Okay, and as long as it's working for everybody else, I don't really mind. Okay, so I want to introduce a few other people first. Before we bring Sylvia into the room, I'd like to first bring some words into the room from other people who have written about Sharon's words. So I don't know who this gentleman is. I think it's, who am I looking at here? Sorry, let me just skip it. I'm going to take that away, so I keep seeing the wrong person. Okay, so what I'd like to do is invite Gaby Andrews, first of all, to read us a few words, or tell us a few words that she had to say about Sharon's book. Is Gaby around? Where is Gaby?
It seems we don't have Gaby. Maybe she's still approaching Saint Jean, so maybe we're going to have to move along.
All right, so we'll yeah, okay. So I was going to just tell you about Gaby. She's just in her absence, she is the founder of the Cape Camino, which is one of South Africa's homegrown Caminos. And Sharon and I met Gaby and her daughter Peggy in 2011 in the remote Galician village of Lires, which sits on the Camino Finisterre between Finisterre and Muxia. So it was just a very opportune thing that we happened to bump into them at that moment. And that sort of sparked a whole journey for Gaby, which ended up in creating the South African Camino, which is doing very well. So is Sharon Kirsten in the room?
Well, Sharon, maybe you want to just share Gaby's words, because we don't know. I mean, there's load shedding, there technical difficulties. So I wonder, do you want to just share them?
I'll read what Gaby wrote. Her review was, walking a Camino is a thoroughly personal experience. The intensity and intimacy of Sharon's journey is beautifully told. She lays her heart open on the road and on the pages and shares her insights generously. No two Caminos are ever the same, and Sharon inspires the reader to travel their own pilgrimage on Camino and into the soul. So those beautiful words from Gaby. All right, so is Sharon Kirsten in the room? And if you are, can you unmute yourself? All right, I'm just going to introduce you first of all. Sharon is an adventurous and intrepid traveler. No mountain is too high or valley is too deep for her to venture into to add to her birding list, or too many blisters to stop her grueling Namakaland eco walk. And like Sharon, this Sharon is a person who greatly values sitting and sipping. So over to you, Sharon Kirsten.
Thank you. Dance with Sharon and the terrain and weather of Spain as she walks the Camino with all its challenges and reward. And like any dance, it's the light and shade of the extraordinary connections Sharon makes along her pilgrimage, which makes walking the way nuanced with emotion and raw honesty. Walking the way is to be savored rather than devoured. Sharon's writing encourages a dip into the detail, to be completely present, to smell her intoxicating first cup of morning coffee, to share her buttery crisp pastry. Follow her beloved Salomon boots through the dust and heat of the Spanish plains, over cold mountain passes all the way to Finisterre. Walking the way invites you to pay attention, to surrender to a way of storytelling that will grip your heart with intensity and will awaken you to the pilgrim path that is the Camino.
Thank you so much, Sharon. So now we have another Sharon. It's all Sharons tonight. Sharon Jansen, are you in the room? And where are you? If you are there, you can unmute yourself. I'm just going to say a few words about Sharon. She's undoubtedly one of the elders of the South African coaching community. She's a previous president of the South African chapter of the International Coach Federation, and she's a sought-after executive coach and coach supervisor. She's also a foodie, and possibly after reading Sharon's book, she has a greater appreciation for the simple cheese and tomato that she has often teased Sharon about. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
You can.
Okay. So these are the words that I wrote after reading the book. Do you have a deep desire to be known as a pilgrim on the Camino? To have completed many dusty kilometers in the blazing sun or slushy kilometers in the pouring rain, and answered some of your big life questions? Whether you have walked the Camino, always wanted to, or are getting ready for 2021, this little gem is a must read. It isn't about the obvious, all you need to know to walk the Buen Camino. It's about the less obvious, the hidden and unexpected along the path. At one time in my life, I thought I may walk on the Camino path, and now I know for sure that that isn't something I want to do. I would rather embark on the path vicariously with Sharon. That way, she does the hard yards, and I perch on the Duta backpack and am part of the conversations, the meetings, the musings, and the meals, the simplicity of which leaves me with a greater appreciation of a ripe tomato or fried eggs. Walking the way in wonder and words enabled this option for me. It has also generated a desire in me to be a better observer. Sharon has a way with words, weaving pictures, provoking emotions, and expressing her love of connection and the process of connecting, sharing with us her first impressions based on what she, as an acute observer, notices and is curious about, and how she follows this curiosity down the path to where the connection is formed. I invite you to walk this path with Sharon and her friends, and you will feel richer for the experience and possibly notice a deep desire for soft, pillowy bread, cheese, and red ripe tomatoes, whilst sharing in these deep, heartfelt meetings of people from all over the world, converging and making connections.
Wonderful words, Sharon. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And some final words from our friend Pam Dangelmeyer, who is an author in her own right, a business owner, and a mindfulness facilitator and coach. And she is based in Vancouver. She's also one of Sharon's dearest Camino friends and part of her treasured Camino class of 2013. Are you around? Where are you, Pam?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Delia.
Okay.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting Elke and I to be part of this book launch, and congratulations to you, Sharon. So awesome. So fabulous, so wonderful. This book is definitely going to be one that I know Elke and I are going to be giving to many of our family and friends because it's so amazing. And yeah, to the words that I wrote, which were really heartfelt after reading your book. What I wrote was, in a time when humanity is in need of humanity, Sharon's writing is like a soothing balm for the soul. Her skillful ability to wonderfully weave words that reflect her heartfelt interactions along the way will have you laughing and crying and reflecting on your own interactions with others. It is her talent as a born listener and a graceful writer that makes this book so very special. It's the words, the people, the places, the emotions, the insights are all magically presented in a way that makes it very hard to put this book down. You'll be left enlightened and hopeful and believing that despite the good and bad in all of us, there is hope for the future if we simply take the time to thoughtfully listen to and learn from our fellow human beings. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam. That was wonderful. Thanks all of you, all of the people that took the time to read and review Sharon's book. So we're now going to move into the conversation with Sylvia. Sylvia conversing with Sharon, but I want to just introduce Sylvia first of all. For those of you who have never heard of Sylvia, there are three words that together make a complete sentence. And these three words are Camino, South Africa, Sylvia Nilsen. She's a pilgrim among pilgrims. And I understand that she has a special status that allows her to sit at the front row of the cathedral at Santiago de Compostela. Those of you who know that cathedral will know that is an auspicious thing to have. She's the author of 6 books about the Camino. She is the founder of Amma Walkers on the Camino and the leader of many Camino groups. She takes Camino groups on. She leads many Camino groups, put it that way. A member of various Camino forums, and she's the founder of SA Pilgrims on the Camino forum. She is the person who trains the hospitaleros in South Africa to serve in the Camino albergues. A person who is deeply in service and we suspect deeply in love with the Camino. And this is a love affair for nearly 20 years. She walked her first Camino in 2001 and was due to walk her 13th Camino with her family in 2020. And we all know what happened this year. So without any further ado, I just need to tell you one thing. I'm going to be the timekeeper. I'm going to invite Sylvia and Sharon to chat, and both of them love to tell stories and, you know, could get lost in time. So I'm going to do this. That sounds better. Just before it's time for them to stop. And, pardon?
I'm just going to mute all, and then you just unmute yourself, okay?
I have been muted.
Go ahead.
Right. Well, you may begin. Sylvia. Can't hear you, Sylvia.
Hang on.
Sorry, I thought Sharon was going to speak first.
No.
About her meeting with Johnny Walker
Oh,
in 2011.
okay.
Remember?
Yeah. All right. So just from my side, hello everyone. And sorry, I did ask Michelle to do the tech, but I'm so used to sort of facilitating that I can't help myself. So it's wonderful to have you all with us in the room. And what I'd like to do just is to say how Sylvia and I met. We've actually never met in person. We've had a few near misses. But in 2011, I walked on a route called the Via della Plata. It's not the main route that most people know. It's a route that runs up from Sevilla in the south of Spain and ends in Santiago. And I started a walk. I had a very difficult day's walk, and I kind of collapsed into a bar on the other side. And in that bar, in my terribly downcast state, because I was just absolutely finished from my walk, and I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I've kind of overestimated what I can do. In the bar, I met sort of Spain's equivalent of Sylvia. So Sylvia is like the South Africa person. There's a chap called Johnny Walker. And Johnny Walker is very, very active and involved in the Camino community. And in that bar, I happened to meet Johnny Walker, and he had written a guidebook on that very route that I was on. So he was an absolute savior, because him and the chap he was walking with, Stephen, said, oh, okay, well, maybe you need to make some adjustments. And I guess this is kind of like rule number 2 of the Camino. Whatever plan you had, be prepared to toss it aside. So I duly tossed my plan aside, carried on with my walk. And then about the following year, late in the following year, I contacted Johnny because I was thinking of doing a kind of a walking coaching Camino. And I thought Johnny would be a very good person to speak to because he knows everybody who's anybody in the Camino world. And so he was the one who put me in touch with you. I think he wrote a letter, he sent you an email to check it would be all right for us to chat. And then based on that, the following year, you and I had a conversation. I will always remember that conversation because when I told you I wanted to take a group, the first thing you said is, Sharon, you have to realize that it won't be your Camino. And I was like, what do you mean it won't? She said, no, if you're taking a group, it's going to be about the group. So I said, yeah, but I'm not going to be a tour guide. I'm going to make it clear to people. I'll see them every 3 days and we'll meet up and we'll do some group work. And there was a very wry chuckle from your side and a kind of, I don't think so.
Well, I think I put you in touch with Pam Stern from Cape Town, because Pam's first Camino had been with a fellow called Jacques Theron, who did that type of Camino, Sharon. He took people on a spiritual Camino, but they had to book all their own accommodation and they could stay in albergues or in hotels, and they would start walking and then he would walk with them and do the spiritual bit in the evening. So I put you in touch with Pam, and I think it was about 2 years later I contacted you because we'd been doing the Hospitaleros training courses since 2009, and one of the role play segments we did was on conflict management. You know, there's often conflict in the albergues. People think it's like Wonderland, the Camino, but sometimes there's a bit of malice in Wonderland, and so you have to deal with pilgrim conflict, separating fighting pilgrims. They might be fighting over a bed or something. If it's practical, it's easy, but sometimes it's a bit deeper than that. You can have conflict between a pilgrim and a hospitalera, or worse, 2 hospitaleros, and I contacted you to ask for advice on what could we present, what sort of tools could we use to empower hospitaleros not to fight with each other in the albergues, and you were the perfect person for that, so that was fabulous. Anyway, oh.
I was really happy to make that kind of input, because being a hospitalero, you know, you serve, and there has always been a sense for me, I've taken so much from the Camino, I've received so much, should I also be serving, but I can't quite get myself into that space. So I'm glad I managed to make a contribution on the conflict side. Yeah.
But then we carried on with contact, didn't we? And then you asked me to review your book.
Well, I'll tell you what, yeah, because we've kept in touch over the years, but virtually. So I've followed you and you've followed me. And at the beginning of this year, well, sort of early in the year, when my written piece was at a stage that I thought, all right, I would like somebody to review it. You were the most obvious choice, but you were also a terrifying choice. I must tell you that. So when I sent it to you, well, not so much when I sent it to you, I did ask your permission, because I know you get completely inundated with requests. And I think you said to me at the time you were in a job where you were checking 2,000 references, that you'd had to go online to check every one. So I did ask if it would be all right to send it. You said yes. Off it went to Pinetown. And then I waited for your response. And when the email came, I had to take a lot of deep breaths, really feel my feet flat on the floor, because I was so uncertain of how my writing would land with you, that my sense was it might be a little different. And I knew you in the time and the contact that we'd had over the years as one of the most straightforward, direct people. You were not somebody to tell people what they wanted to hear. You would tell it as it was true for you. And I remember you telling me about you and Pam when you wanted to take a group, you were going to take a group together. And her number one question was, do you see yourself more as yin or yang? And your number one question is, what's your blood group?
Pam wanted to make little cards for each pilgrim. And I said, that's fabulous. We'll put their name and address and a contact number next of kin and the blood group on it. And Pam said, no, I thought of inspirational little quotes on each one and flowers and butterflies. And I said, Pam, we are yin and yang. But Sharon, I must correct you. I said no at first to reading your book, because I said to you, I don't take manuscripts anymore. I can't bear to read them. It's almost as though there's a downloadable template now that pilgrims can take. And you just fill in the dots. I started in St. Jane, Roncesvalles, Pamplona. I walked for 20 kilometers, 25, 26. I met X number of people. I washed my clothes. I had something to eat. I had a sleep. I got up. I walked. And I said, I've had too many of those, Sharon. I can't bear them. And you said, no, my book's different. And I said, everybody says their book is different. And you said, no, but mine are letters to people. I said, yes, I've got a book on my shelf right behind me here. Letters on the Camino. And you said, no, Syl, mine's not letters about sending letters from the Camino to people. This is about, I said, okay, Sharon, send it. And I must say it was different, Sharon. It was really lovely. And the thing I like most about it is the first letter was to yourself. And I think for anybody who hasn't walked the Camino, you actually need to write a letter to yourself and keep it at home, because you're not going to be the same person when you come home. So you need to write the letter and say, hey, Syl or Dee or Sharon or Pam, I'm leaving you now. I'm going on this amazing journey, and I might not be the same person when I get back. And so that's why I really loved your first chapter. It was very different, and I just wondered what made you decide to write a book, write letters for a book.
Yeah, Well, it was never really an intention to write a book. So the fact that we're here where we are today is quite amazing, because that certainly wasn't the intention. I really love writing, and I was very lucky last year to go on a writing retreat on Whidbey Island with the magical, wonderful Christina Baldwin, who is in the room. So Christina, thank you so much for coming. And some of my other Whidbey sisters, thank you to them for coming. And I was really the greenie of that group. I mean, I'm used to being in situations where I'm reasonably competent and, you know, kind of okay. And here I was, like, really the baby. And the invitation to us was to present something on the last day. And most of the women in a group were already working on pieces, and were already published authors. And I didn't have a piece. But what came out of my time there was a letter that I ended up writing to our housekeeper, called a love letter to my housekeeper, which I wrote from Whidbey, but it was partly there and partly here in the relationship with her. And it just, what came out of that for me was that the letter was such a wonderful way that I found to be in story, because it was the story of her, the story of me, the story of us together, the story of Whidbey. There were so many things, and in the reworking, it just went deeper and deeper. So I called it the journey of 2,500 words. But it really just opened up something quite marvelous for me as a method. So after coming back from being in America, I worked on it more and kind of put it out there. And then shortly thereafter, it was Heritage Day, which is coming up for us soon here in South Africa on the 24th of September. And I thought, oh, well, it'll be really lovely on Heritage Day to write a letter to my grandmother. 16 years gone, but not gone. And that was the second letter. And then shortly thereafter, I was like, well, I'd love to write some more. And I'd really like to write about the Camino. It was logical, because people have been saying to me for ages, when are you going to write about the Camino? And I thought, well, how would I like to write? So it's not that kind of thing that you were talking about. I woke up at X time, I walked so far. I thought, what would be a nice way to be in the writing? And then it just sort of came to me, well, letters. So I sat down and I kind of made a list and thought, well, who would I write to?
That's what I was going to ask you. I've got a book here by a fellow called Robert Ward. It's called All the Good Pilgrims. And he mentions all the pilgrims he's met on the Camino. And I think many pilgrims say that that is one of the most joyous and wonderful things about the Camino, is the people you meet and the families you make and the friendships you forge on the Camino. But he mentioned, I think, about 120 pilgrims, and it became just totally confusing. The book, I thought, who is Jose and where did Pierre come from? And so I just wondered, on your 9 Caminos, how did you choose who you were going to write to? And did you change their names in the book, or did you get permission to include them? I mean, did any say no? Did any say, no, I don't want you to write about me?
Okay, well, to answer the first question, how did I decide in the 9 Caminos? Well, most of the people are from 2019, which was last year's Camino. And it was pilgrims I met on the way, but it was also people alongside the path. So it wasn't necessarily only pilgrims. It might have been somebody who was working in a bar, or somebody I encountered on a bench and spent some time sitting with, because the Camino is about so much more than the pilgrims. And then people who were accompanying me, so people from home, people who read what I was writing, people who accompanied me in different ways. So what I call my Camino community, my Camino brothers and sisters, they are always walking with you. You may have walked 1 year together, but you continue to walk with them. And you remember the places you were and what you did. And just there's always that sense of, it's not just me. Even if my choice is to predominantly walk on my own, but I'm not alone, because, you know, there's so many people who are journeying with me. I didn't have, you know, as you'll know, there weren't going to be 170 because I identified who were the key people, who were those people that I had connected with more deeply. And then there were the bookends. So it wasn't just them, it was also me, as you say, that first letter. Then a fairly important person who comes in towards the end of the letters, who we had walked Caminos together, but we don't anymore. But coming to your second question about, you know, the people that were there and what about them, and it was something I thought quite a lot about. You know, there's a fair amount that's revealed about them, and do I use their names, do I not use their names? So I had a bit of a checklist. My first question was, how much of their story am I telling? How much about their way of being, their way of doing, who they are in the world? So how much of that is coming through? Secondly, is there biographical information that could give somebody a hint of who they are? A name, a country of origin, information about them, like X person using their name has 4 children and does this, you know, was there a closeness? And then the third question, which admittedly was a judgment call that I was making, was the question of, if they read this, would they feel some level of discomfort in what I had written about them? Would there be an unease for them? And if the answer to all 3 questions was yes, then I contacted them, shared the letter with them, and said, would you like me to change your name? Because I'll gladly do so.
And did anybody say no, they didn't want to be in your book?
No. And people said, actually, it was a really interesting response. I said, gee, thank you. Like, thank you for writing that. I really enjoyed it, and absolutely fine for you to use my name.
I found it quite interesting that you had such deep connections with people on the Camino. I found that I had connections with people when I was a hospitalera, because you have time with people. I didn't really have that many deep connections with pilgrims as such, because they're kind of transient. You know, you meet them, you're in a bar, and then you separate. So how does being a coach affect you when you're on a Camino? Are you still a coach? Are you still Sharon Wakeford, the coach? When you meet someone, are you assessing them from a coach's point of view?
Okay, well, that's an interesting thing. Am I assessing them? So, you know, in my early years, so I trained as a coach in 2009, and I walked my first Camino. Dee and I walked together in 2010. And, you know, when you are new to something, you make rookie mistakes. So whether you're training for your first marathon and you overtrain, you know, whether you just become a coach, what do you want to do? You want to coach everybody in sight because you want to be of service and you want to practice your craft. So look, I won't say I was coaching Dee on the Camino. You don't coach nearest and dearest, because they'll tell you very quickly, I know this is a conversation of coaching and I didn't ask for it. Okay, so there wasn't that much coaching that year. But, you know, in the subsequent years, I did notice that I would slip into coaching conversations, being the coach. It's quite seductive, you know? But I realized, and I find this, whether it's a coaching conversation or another kind of conversation, it's quite easy then to lose connection to the path, to lose presence to what's going on around you. So I've become very conscious over the years to go, okay, this looks like it could be a coaching conversation. Do I want to have it? And really have that conversation with myself first, that I'm not just coaching left, right, and center, because it changes the experience for me. And I have had some fantastic conversations which have been really special. And the others I choose not to have. But there's also something interesting that happens when somebody discovers you are a coach. Suddenly it's like this, blah, you know, or it's like, oh, Sharon, you're a coach, you can tell me the answer to the question. Then I go, oh, clearly you don't know what coaching is. Because that ain't coaching. But it's a very interesting thing that happens because, you know, everybody is walking in their story on the Camino. I mean, everybody's in their story in life. And what is one of our greatest needs is to be heard. So that's, you know, that's the thing. And for me, it's drawing a distinction between being a coach and having a coaching way of being, which is about listening. It's about asking questions. It's that kind of thing that almost becomes quite embodied within you.
So on all of those, have you always written about those experiences? Have you, you know, on your Caminos, have you always kept a journal, or have you always kind of kept notes about the people that you have met?
So that's been quite an evolutionary thing. In the early years, so when Dee and I, we did 2 Caminos together, she had a little notebook, and in the evenings I would dictate and Dee would write. So we did a few like that, and we'd always done that when we were traveling. Then when I started walking on my own, I had a notebook and I would write like a bit of a daily sort of journal thing. But I found it quite limiting because there was so much more that I wanted to say, and I found it was taking so long that I thought, okay, now we also had some advances in technology. I'd make voice recordings. So in the morning when I'd get going, I would have, like, you know, my cell phone, and I'd be holding my sticks in one hand because I was walking with sticks, and I'd be crunching along the path, giving the story of what had happened the day before. And the recordings got longer and longer and longer. Pam and Elka are probably laughing because I did share the recordings with them. They were the only people apart from Dee that I shared them with. When I came back home, we used to listen to the recordings, like every night we'd listen to one. And it was actually quite wonderful. It was a way of sharing. And that's a big thing about the Camino. It's the sharing of the stories. Dee did used to say, oh, you know, couldn't you have just stopped and done this thing while you were sitting down? I'm hearing your boots crunching and you sound breathless. You must have been going up a hill. But then you'd also get the Buen Caminos, which was actually a wonderful piece of it, you know, people greeting each other. Anyway, so I did a few years of voice recordings. And then one year I just thought, I just am not in the mood for voice recordings. And then I started writing again, and then using notes and doing Facebook posts.
I don't want to interrupt you, but you didn't use a fountain pen for all those notes, did you?
No, the fountain pen only came in 2019. And I know, here, this is my very, very precious, let me put it on this, very, very precious pen. So no, I didn't use a fountain pen because those daily notes, I used just to do, like, you know, the one finger typing. But what changed for me in 2019 when I got this lovely pen was to distinguish between what I called the practical posts, kind of the day-to-day, the sort of the story of the day, which I would do on my phone. So the practical pieces, and then what I'd call sort of the more poetic pieces. I mean, not to sound like I'm a poet, but just those pieces that weren't about just what was happening in the day. They were often what was happening in me, how I was dealing with stuff. And I just found this pen opened up a very different space and a different way of writing.
Sharon, I think your writing is poetic. I think in my review I called it lyrical. And I told you I found it in a similar style as, say, Laurie Lee, who wrote about Spain. I've read a lot of books, and some people write in their own voice. I've got a couple of books here. I open the book, I read it, and I think that sounds exactly like her. They use their own voice, even colloquialisms. Other people seem to change. It must be the fountain pen, because your writing was very lyrical. I mean, how would you describe your style of writing? Is it lyrical? Is it your voice? How do you describe it?
Yeah, I guess it's my written voice, So one of the really interesting things that Christina said, because I told Christina at the writing retreat that I often spoke rather than wrote. And she said there is a difference between our spoken storytelling and our written storytelling, that something different happens within us. And I think that was such a wonderful thing that she said, because I always thought, oh yeah, I can just speak it. But there was really something, a richness that came in the writing, a different level of depth, a different sort of creativity with words, like playing with words, but maybe using them in slightly different kind of ways. Yeah, bringing different images together, also just in the time, you know, because you've got a little bit more time. But for me, one of the marvelous things about the fountain pen is that there's a flow of your hand. I mean, it's the physical sensation, and it's what that opens up for you. So I find if I write on a computer, it takes me forever because I write 3 words and then I change 2. Yeah. Whereas with a fountain pen, there is a flow, and it's like a smoothness and ease. It's uncensored, it's unedited. So for me, that was quite a wonderful thing. And kind of the more you do it, the more it becomes a habit. And in fact, it becomes quite a need. And if I was having a rough day, and believe me, you know, we have many rough days and rough patches, the pen was an extremely useful way of processing what was happening.
So the pen was the story catcher, and the phone was just the recorder. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a wonderful term you use, and it's something that I mention in the letters. And what I'd love to do is just share some words of what a story catcher is, because I guess that's what I would sort of see myself as. It's a bit of an unusual term. It's a wonderful term, kind of a storyteller, but a story catcher, somebody who's really pulling in, you know, different pieces. So I want to just read Christina, because this is her term. She's written many books, and she's got a book called Story Catcher, and it's making sense of our lives through the power and practice of story. And this is how she describes story catcher. And I guess I want to say, well, when I'm big, you know, that's what I want to be, because I'm not saying I am that. Because if I read the description, for those of you who've read any of the book, you'll know there's some boxes I don't tick. But what Christina says is, story catchers are intrigued by human experience, inquisitive about meaning, insight, and learning, more curious than judgmental, that's probably where I fall down a bit, more in love with questions than answers, empathetic without over-identification, able to hold boundaries in interpersonal space, able to be present while others experience emotion, able to be present while others have insight, able to safeguard the space for listening, able to invite forgiveness, release, and grace, aware of story's power and to use it consciously, practitioners of the heart of language.
That's beautiful, Sharon. I think all of that you've been able to use in your Camino stories must have been very enriching for you. But were there any downsides? I mean, we all have downsides. Sometimes maybe things didn't turn out like all people. Look, I mentioned in the review about the Italian lady who you had a wrong assessment about. And then your first impression wasn't a good one. And then you felt that you had a wrong thing. So with all these experiences and the enrichment of it, have there been downsides to being the coach on the Camino sort of thing?
Well, yeah, there have been downsides. I have arrived at places and gone, well, where have I been for the last 2 hours? Because I didn't actually remember anything of what I saw. And I remember once, I'm going to make a disclosure. Well, I disclose a lot in the book, but I got so involved in telling the story of somebody, and I told it on a Facebook post, and I mentioned a name, and I put a picture up. And my dear friend Elka called me on it, and she said, "Oi, you know, that's not okay." And one of my other friends also said, So that was a very big slap. And it was a slap that was deserved. But it's like sometimes getting a bit carried away in telling the story. And yeah, I mean, for me, then I went to a very difficult place. And I remember to this day standing in a door archway in a very, very beautiful village called Villafranca del Bierzo, feeling as miserable as hell, because I had just thought, oh, how could you do that? That was just so not okay. So I'd become a lot more circumspect. And it was just the sense of crushing disappointment, being in this very beautiful village, but feeling as awful as could be, and then needing to let go of that judgment. How could you do that? You should have known better. It's not okay. Feeling absolutely mortified. I mean, I took the post down, but it was like, even though the post was gone, it was still sitting in me, and just having to kind of work through that. So that sort of discernment, you know, being more discerning about the story that I was telling and how to tell that story.
So this is like the curse of the story catcher, is it? That you sometimes...
This was terrible. This was really, really awful. So that's the one piece, you know, and it's like, you mentioned the story of Marciela, who I met in Rabanal del Camino, and just getting her so wrong. You know, we are constantly making meaning. We constantly in our judgments and opinion. And the Camino has a way of sticking its finger in your eye and going, it's not like that, you know. And I mean, that's one of the themes and threads that run through the book, is how many times we bump up against that and kind of having to eat a little bit of humble pie. But what is another, I suppose, a dimension in a way to this wanting to tell the story is a real conundrum about, like, when is a story a story? So I'm going to share with you, it's a piece I wrote which actually it's never been heard, and it's just quite funny that I'll share it now. And it goes like this. It's called, oh, wrong piece of paper. It's called Sunday, Sant Ibanez, which is a small village on the Camino. Sunday, Sant Ibanez, and the curse of the story catcher. The curse of the story catcher, not a curse that is placed on others through the stories that they might be the subject of, but one carried on the shoulders of the story catcher themselves. The untold stories that gargle and gurgle, waiting to find their way into form and structure, a rich aliveness in this gurgling, but also an annoyance, a distraction from being fully present in and to the moment. Or is it that said stories, in their gargling, are also part of that moment? Where or when does the story become a living, breathing being? Does it only begin in the telling, become a proper story when it's told? What if it doesn't find its way into form? Is a story only a story if it finds another's ears? Or is it simply more of a story if it finds others' ears and understanding? Musings and meanderings aside, a strong somatic tide that the unspoken story sets upon my body, a perturbance at the level of the nervous system, my system shaken and stirred by the not telling of the story to some tiny part of the world, a restlessness in my connective tissue, the untold story like a Scalextric's car lapping around its circuit, constrained, contained, never finding the freedom of the open road or the untraveled path. So as I sit here in a sunny, smooth square of sunshine on this St. Ibeneth Sunday, I find myself poked and prodded. Questions, not answers, but certainly the winding brown path to Astorga will provide ample space to ponder and possibly step towards some answers. That's, of course, if yesterday's as yet untold stories don't still take pole position in my consciousness. Miles of dusty contemplation were, however, not required. A mere 20 steps along the path. What was offered to me? A story is a story, told or untold. A sentient being without having to be birthed. A sentient being with the potential to be or not to be in print. And with this offering, an easing for me of my internal scalextrics, an acceptance that some stories would remain only on my circuit, and that would be okay. And with that, I could walk in a different way, fully present to that moment, no longer the captive of my conundrum. Letting go is not only about being freed from the grip of one's unresourceful habits and patterns, but also, where necessary, stepping away from our deepest yearnings and callings. And maybe it is the latter that is the more stretching sight of our surrender. So, dear companions, some stories will reach you and others not, as my words and I make our way along the path to Santiago.
Oh, fabulous, Sharon. Wonderful, wonderful. So who do those stories belong to? Somebody put a question up on the screen. Who do the stories belong to? The storyteller or the protagonist in the story?
Gosh, so the coach in me wants to say to the person who asked the question, well, who do you think they belong to? But you know what? For me, the beauty of stories is their universality. So it might be my story, it might be the story of somebody that I'm meeting with, but there's something way beyond that. It's our story. And even, you know, in the reading, something that I so value about story is that my story might take you into your story. Stories are really invitational. So you may read something that really resonates with you and you go off down your own path. And I think that's the beauty of it. Or there's something in my story that connects me to you. So even though you've never met me, that connected me to somebody else, that connects you to Muriel, you know, in letter number 9, or connects you to Paloma, you know, in letter number, 16. You know, whose stories are, what are the stories really about? They're the stories of being human.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Oh, Sharon. I thought I'd like to ask you about the drawings in your book. You know, if anyone hasn't got the book, I just want Sharon sitting right in front of that. But the drawing was fabulous. Such symbolism there. I mean, that is the whole Camino on one page. It's the backpack, it's the shell, it's the arrow, it's the walking sticks. Tell me a bit about the drawings.
Okay.
I'm a part of the book.
So when I first was doing the writing, I thought, oh, maybe it'd be quite nice for each letter to include some photographs to show people of what was happening, you know, where I was, what was around me. And then I thought, that may be nice, and it could take away from people's own picture making. And I would far rather people be immersed in their own picture. So it's their picture of what maybe it looks like in Alvaroa in the pouring rain, not my picture showing them. So I thought, maybe photographs are not such a good idea because they're too representative. But I thought I'd love to include something in the way of visual. And I thought, what about drawings? And I was really, really lucky to find my illustrator. So, you know, most times, you know, if you're anywhere in the world, you Google. If you live in Johannesburg and you're trying to find something, you or somebody you deputize, dearly beloved, goes to the I Love Parkhurst page, because you can find anything on the I Love Parkhurst page. And on this page, we found a wonderful person called Abigail Schlichter. And she was the person who did the drawings. It was a hell of a job. And she brought so much skill, but also so much love. And I've been very blessed on this journey that everybody who's played a role, you know, who's performed a function or brought their skill has not only done that, but they've brought it with a lot of love. So when Abby first responded to the message, she said, "Oh, I would love to be part of this project," which was just amazing, you know, that somebody was bringing that. So it was the week before the lockdown started. I think Abby came around on the Wednesday and lockdown was starting like on the Friday morning. And we sat here in my office and we had a look at some drawings. So they were mainly from photographs and then some that she combined. So the cover drawing was a combination of a few different pictures that she put together really, really beautifully and skillfully. And one of the drawings, in one of my favorites of the onions, was something that Abby had to draw kind of from scratch. And it was that in itself was quite a journey. So for me, it just brought a real richness. So each letter has its drawing. And then in terms of the cover, you were mentioning the back and the front and what's there. I was very, very lucky to come across a wonderful designer who took Abby's drawing and did the rest of the cover design, a wonderful, wonderful man called Greg Davies. And I look forward to the lockdown ending so that we can go out and have a beer.
Talking about the lockdown, Sharon, I know you were planning to walk the Camino, as were we, not next year. This year we were supposed to this year, 2020, yeah, we were going to walk the Camino. What has it meant to you not to be walking? I mean, for most of us, it's been dreadful. Pam was planning to walk. I was planning to walk with my husband and my granddaughter. And I know you specifically have plans when you're going to walk. It must have been tough for you as well.
Yeah, so I think it's been tough for many, many people. I mean, just generally lockdown, whether you know, the Camino was one of your casualties or something else was one of your casualties, many people doing many things which they then couldn't do. And part of you goes, oh, well, you know, this is just like first world problems, you know, there's a lot of suffering, you know, that's taking place. And I think there's something about feeling the loss and experiencing the grief for what you haven't been able to do. And that's perfectly valid. So a real sadness for me in not going. It would have been Camino number 10. It was one of the first years I'd actually booked very far in advance, you know, and then, you know, that just having to let that go. And, you know, there's so many pieces to that because there's the loss of that time. And for me, the Camino is very much a time of spirituality. So I'm not a religious person, but just in the rhythm and the simplicity of that way, there's something about really going back to basics, going to that place in you of what matters and being in a way that you want to be. So it wasn't, it was the loss of that. It was then in its place, like this most incredible period of work intensity. So instead of having 5 weeks in Europe, which was what Dee and I had planned to do, three weeks for me would have been the walking time. It was being at home and working harder than ever, like so many people here, adjusting to an online world, you know, and everything that required. So there was, you know, there was the loss of that and the connection and the travel and the exploration and all of those things. What there was also, and this probably sounds like a bit weird, is there was the loss of my walking around Joburg. Because usually around April, I'll start my training. And it's a wonderful thing being on foot in your own city. And every Sunday I'd go out for about like a 5-6 hour walk. I would have the most interesting conversations with all sorts of people that I wouldn't normally be in conversation with, but there's something that happens as a walker. So that was a great loss for me, not having those. And I thought, oh, okay, we'll do everything online. I'll just do my own walk. Well, for starters, when our lockdown started, we weren't allowed out. Then we got this 3-hour window of opportunity between 6 and 9 in the morning, which was just madness for us all. And then by the time that was extended, we were going into winter. So I didn't ever get out there with my backpack and my sticks, because that's how I would walk. That was my walking around Joburg. So I get a lot of the, where's the snow? Everybody thinks that's so funny. Where's the snow? But, some of the other engagements would be like, well, what are you training for? And for some people, I would say, oh, well, I'm training for the Camino. But what actually became my response was for life. That's really what I'm doing in the walking.
Yeah, I agree. But Sharon, I'm still walking to Santiago. I'm looking at my, on the 23rd of March, Finn and I started walking 5 kilometers a day around our 100-meter circuit around our little cottage and our retirement home. And so far, we are now walking to Ponferrada this weekend. We'll be in Ponferrada tomorrow. We're going to get to Santiago in November. So it's taken us, because we thought we're not giving up our Camino. We were supposed to walk to Santiago. That's what we're going to do. So we started in Saint-Jean on the 23rd of March, but we only walked 5 Ks a day. And so we did about 25 kilometers a week. And we thought, all right, we're going to get to Santiago in November. And everybody laughed, thought it was hysterical. But look where we are already. We're in Ponferrada. But I must say, sorry, getting back to yours, your book has been a wonderful surprise for me. During this lockdown time, I have had a couple of things to do and editing to do and what have you. And the surprise, the unexpected, was your book. So your book is kind of, maybe that's why I said yes, because I needed something Camino.
Thanks, Till. I'm glad the lockdown worked in my favor there.
It did, absolutely. And that's why I devoured it. Normally I take a manuscript, I print it out, I read it with a ruler, underline. Otherwise you just read ahead and you miss things. And so, but yours I read first. I read the whole thing first, and then I started with the proofreading of it. So it took up some of my lockdown time. It was a wonderful gift. Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to that. And so I've absolutely loved your walk on the treadmill, because, what you post, the pictures and the stories, takes me, of course, to my story of, when I was there. So it's been absolutely wonderful embarking on that with you. And in fact, what's been really lovely about this written journey, I've had quite a few people contact me and say, oh, yeah, I'd love to get your book. I was meant to be starting on the 7th. So, a book went to Bloemfontein to a woman who said, I was going to be starting on the 7th, or somebody in Centurion who said, oh, I should have been there now. So in some ways, what, this writing has done, it's offered me a Camino that I couldn't have. It was one that actually started last year in October, because that's when I started writing. And it's like now where it is. And I love that it has actually offered to some other people, and it doesn't make up for it, but there's travel. We're doing some travel in a little bit of a different way, and that's what has been an offering here.
Yeah, no, it's been wonderful. Thank you for asking me to look at your book. It's wonderful.
Well, I was absolutely delighted you did, and just to tell people that Sylvia's wonderful words are actually the foreword of the book, so they're right up there.
Yes, and I didn't know you were a weepy.
A weepy?
You were weepy.
Okay, you can tell that story.
Okay, I sent Sharon the review, as it is in the book, as a foreword. And I thought, well, I hope she's happy with that. It's just a few words. I'll just send it to her. And then I got this WhatsApp that I could hardly make head or tail out of. It was, hello, Syl, Sharon. Oh, sure. I just want to tell you, sure. She was trying to comment on the forward, on the review, and she went on, and I thought, what's wrong with her? I sent you a WhatsApp back. I said, is it okay? And you said, oh, sure, so it's just sure. So I'm glad it was okay, Sharon.
Oh yeah, so I wasn't at my most eloquent self. Okay, I really wasn't. But yeah, I literally was moved to tears by what you'd written, and you know what some of the other people, the reviewers, have shared with me as well. And I mean, it's just been amazing. And that, you know, what I'd written was received in that way. And I think coming from you, Syl, it was even more startling because, you know, you're quite a factual sort of person, you know, and this was very different. And I think that was my sort of hesitation around, well, how is this going to land for you, you know? So I was really, really blown away, and I was blown away by the research you'd done around it.
I think this is your baby. That's why you sent your baby to me. And you thought I was going to be a very strict critic of your baby. It's very hard to give your first book to anybody and ask them to look at it. And then you sit there biting your nails. Will they like it? Will they not like it? Are they going to blow it out of the water? Is it rubbish? Is it just me? And then when you finally get some praise for anything like that, you almost just dissolve. We're all wimps when it comes to our work, I think.
Well, yeah, it's true. It's be very sensitive. It is our baby, you know, and it's like putting it out there, and then, you know, thinking it's not everyone's cup of tea. So the person who wants to read about an A to B of the Camino, this ain't your book. You know, it's not that kind of thing, and it's being okay to say that's not what it is.
Yeah. Anyway. There's the bell.
On cue.
You have 3 minutes left. 3 minutes to wrap up.
Shall I mute myself?
No, okay. I think Syl saying she's good. She's happy to mute herself. Thank you, Syl. I just really was thank you to you. You've been amazing, and we've had some quite robust interaction along our routes. I will say that. So it's always like if I'm going to say A, you're going to say B.
Tonight
I value that about you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sylvia and Sharon, for that conversation. And we've been having very active chats going on here. I've been sort of trying to keep up with them, but I'm now going to hand over to Michelle because we're going to have a little bit of time for questions. And Michelle will handle that. So over to you, Michelle.
Let me unmute myself. Thanks, Dee. So we've got a little bit of time for a few questions. So the way we're going to work it is if you could indicate in the chat group if you have a question, and then we'll start with 3. So if you can indicate on the group if you have a question, and then once I see who has questions, I will call on you, and then you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Do you want them to ask it directly to you, Michelle, or to everyone? I think maybe they could just send it a question.
No, so rather ask it in voice.
Yeah, so that they'll just indicate on the group whether they have the question.
Okay.
They have a question. So sorry if I wasn't clear. Just to say whether you have a question, and then I will give you the go ahead, and you'll unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, so Alka and Pam from Canada have a question. Do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead?
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Sharon, I know obviously this has been a huge undertaking on your part, many, many years in the culmination. I'm wondering if you can share with us what you think was your most challenging challenge in all of this. And also now looking back at that challenge, whether you feel that you successfully completed that challenge or were able to overcome it.
Okay. So Pam, I think that challenge maybe I've been in the last couple of weeks, because it hasn't been the writing. The writing has been a real joy. It's when you get to the time, and you'll know this as a writer, when you're getting to that time of actually putting it out there, when it's going into print and it's going out there into the world, that's where it's been really, really stressful for me, because it's like, oh my goodness, I see a mistake. It's like, how did I put Plaza de Obigo? It should be Plaza de Obradoro. And anybody who knows the Camino is going to be going, oh my goodness, what is she writing about? So for me, that's been the really difficult part. And like getting it ready, sort of to launch it, whether it's going onto Amazon or it's going into print. And I'm very grateful to some very nitpicky people who picked up stuff and said, just a minute, there is a mistake. And there's this feeling of, oh my God, how can I get that wrong? And what do you then try and correct? And what do you let go? And being in this dance. So that's been really, for me, that's been really difficult. And I am so enormously grateful to one other member of our class of 13, Tara, who picked up, who actually did some final proofreading for me, which was really amazing. Not only was she a dear friend, in all the miles on the Camino, but in this journey of the writing. So, I mean, it might sound crazy to say this was the most challenging part, but it was this part that I found really extremely difficult. And oh my goodness, can I live with that? And I could say, we could always say, it's not that we could say things in 10 different ways. We know that, that we can do, but when is it enough? And when are you going to say, okay, it's that. So have I overcome that? No, not yet, as Greg will attest to, who got some edits this afternoon, but it's just kind of, it's managing that piece I found quite tricky. Great.
Has anyone else got a question? I don't see any indication on the chat, but if you do, if you can just indicate on the chat. Julia, you can go ahead.
So Sharon, congratulations, of course. And knowing how hard you are on yourself, just hearing, the picking up of the mistakes and all the imperfections. I'm curious to know, how content are you with what you've created?
Small cookie.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, Julia, I am at a much deeper level. So I think, that stuff is pretty superficial in some ways. Yeah, it's hard and it's what presents. But, beneath that, I have read again and again and again. And since I got my printed version, I have had many readings and it's been a joy. I don't mean to sound sort of boastful, but it's given me a lot of pleasure to be in the reading. So I'm really happy with what it is. And, for me in doing this, it was never about, oh, well, I'm writing a book to just put out there and, have zillions of people reading. It was like, I'd like to write because I love writing and I'd like to be able to share that with people who mean something to me. So that has always been a key piece. And when people who are near and dear send a message and say, sure, I'm really enjoying it. That for me is so special. That piece of it, which brings a wonderful sort of reassurance and, in a way, it sort of helps me to let go of, okay, well, maybe that full stop was on the wrong side of the inverted comma, that maybe is not such a big deal, or maybe that place name, oh, okay, I got Palace there and Palace there, it's a place. So, but yes, in the broader, in terms of what it is and I think what it offers, I am happy with it. I love it, actually. It's yeah, it's a joyful piece and it's a heart piece for me. And maybe there's also that, you know, because it is heartfelt. How will it land with others? Well, you know, that's kind of their choice, but that, yeah, that's theirs.
That's all I wanted to hear.
Jenny, do you want to ask your question? I think you might be on mute, Jenny.
Jenny says she can't connect.
Okay.
The question, do you want to ask the question that she wrote?
She asked, in writing this book, how will it change how do you think it will change your next Camino? Just trying to...
Well, I don't know, you see, and I don't want to go, oh, okay, well, now I've written one, I must write another. You know, that's the last thing that I'd want, to feel like a sense of pressure. So I don't really know, you know, and it maybe it's just about being in that question and walking or writing into an answer, because I don't know how it's going to change it. I mean, what I do know is that it brought me an enormous amount of joy. And one of the questions that I asked myself at the start of this last Camino, would I maybe walk fewer kilometers and have more pauses with pen? And I didn't know when I started. So it was, you know, it was being in the question and seeing what unfolded. But I think it's about light hands, you know, and just a light sense of, well, I don't know, let's see what it might be. Because what I wouldn't want is to feel, okay, well, now it's got to be a second one. And then walking with that sort of obligation, well, that I would then be carrying. And what would that do? Maybe it would take me out of this or take me out of that. And so, yeah, it would be a curiosity, but being mindful of what would be a good way for me to be in, that it's not like, oh, well, now I've got to be stopping and writing things down. Because it was never like that. It was like, now feels like a good time to sit. Now feels like a good time to write. So it was quite kind of spontaneous rather than musts and shoulds, because must and should is an easy place for me. So I wouldn't want it to be that.
So Gabriella wrote on the group, Sharon, that she apologizes for the late entry, and would you like her to read her review? And I know Dee has read her review. I wasn't sure if
she's very welcome to read it if she liked to.
Yeah. Can I unmute you, Gabriella? There we go.
Oh, she's muted again. You're on mute.
There we go.
How's that?
There we go.
Is that working? Sharon's apologies for late start. I'm so sorry. So I don't know how the process has been run, but I just want to say that for me, Sharon's book was indicative of the incredible change that a Camino experience does for you, and irrevocably. I've always thought of it a bit like having a baby. Your life is never, ever the same. Explain to anybody else. You have yourself. So I got that sense from Sharon's book. So what I wrote was, walking a Camino is a thoroughly personal experience. The intensity and intimacy of Sharon's journey is beautifully told. She lays her heart open on the road and on the pages, and shares her insights generously. No two Caminos are ever the same, and Sharon inspires the reader to travel their own pilgrimage on Camino and into the soul. I walked part of the Camino, about 450 kilometers, and that's where I met Sharon. And out there in Spain, my daughter and I, and Sharon and Delia, and we struck up a conversation and a relationship, and since then we've sort of gently stayed in touch. And I was most flattered that she wanted me to read her book and to write a comment on it. And I really when reading it, felt that same camaraderie that you automatically have with other Camino walkers?
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Sharon. Congratulations.
Okay, I don't see anyone else asking for a question. Keith, do you want to go ahead?
I think Elke also had one.
Okay, sorry, I must have missed that. Okay, well.
Me? Oh, well, hello. Okay, first of all, Sharon, congratulations from my side too. I always loved your writing, and when I was reading your Facebook posts mainly, I always thought, okay, I want to read the rest of the book, because the way you write, the way you tell stories was always, yeah, I just couldn't stop. So I'm so glad you wrote this book. And but my real question is, when the movie comes out, are you going to play your own part, and can we be part of it in the movie? Because Pam is actually an actress, and we thought we'd just put the word out in case you're planning to have this, movie, and we would like to be part of this.
Thanks, Elke. I'll definitely keep that in mind. So I don't know about a movie, but what my friend Jen said, oh, Sharon, what about an audiobook? So that's I'm thinking a little bit about, because there's something I think lovely in the telling, in the telling of the story. So that might be something to explore. In terms of movie, I don't know. And there may be some people who wouldn't be putting their hand up. So somebody who's quite close to me, sort of in the next room, said, oh, Sharon, because I didn't ask for permission for that one, okay? And he said, oh, people are going to read that and go, oh, gosh, she's so volatile. So I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, so in case you decide to have an audiobook, Pam actually will, very often people say to her, I love your voice, because we have a mail order business and she's on the phone a lot, and so many people say, I love your voice. Would you come and read my bedtime story? So she actually has customers asking her. So there's your first voice for your audiobook.
No. Sharon needs to do it, because her accent is lovely.
Yes.
We just melt in it. Whenever you send us the voice message, we sit and we replay it because we think it's delightful.
Yes,
so definitely you should read it yourself.
That's the South African accent. We don't care what you say, just talk.
Just talk.
Okay, thanks for that.
I know Keith had a question. Keith, do you want to unmute and ask it? Keith's still there?
Right, I guess. Sharon used the words must and should in her commentary. And the way I responded to that or thought about that is that those words kind of relate to and often are the terms of the everydayness of life, those words. But then my question was, but does walking the Camino really offer the opportunity for spontaneity, reflexiveness, and just being, and then taking this way of being back into everyday life to get away from must and should?
Yeah, I think, Keith, that's, that one of the big things about the Camino is, how do I live in a Camino way off the Camino? Because the Camino does invite you into a different way, okay? But then it's like, well, what happens when I go back? And I've often really found it very difficult to sort of reintegrate. So what happens to me when I come home? I've gone into quite a decline, because that way is seemingly not on offer here. And I think that's the challenge, to say, how do I incorporate those aspects, that way that I was, living in a more simple way, more in touch with what really matters to me? How do I bring that back into my everyday life? And I think we do that in many different ways. I mean, not everybody has the possibility to go on the Camino, but it's about thinking about where was I really a good self? How was I a good self in that space? And what can I do to be that person? And it does require a level of consciousness, a level of deliberateness, to say, I'm making choices around that. So this is what I'm going to do. That person I really liked. That person was more accepting. And I was asked a question earlier in the week. I mean, what is it ultimately about? It's a journey into self-acceptance. And I think that's, you know, for all of us, that's probably the biggest journey that we undertake. So how do I take those pieces, that way of being, and bringing it into this world? So I don't think that there isn't space for it. I think it's about how we engage with it, and that we are conscious about it, and we're making choices around it, and we're calling ourselves and we're catching ourselves where we're just slipping into old habits and old patterns. So, you know, having some reference points, having some pauses, because we get so busy. I think this is the other thing, that we don't take the time just to sit and have a cup of coffee and reflect on where we are and how we're doing and how we're being. And we can do that, even if we, you know, we can't go walking in Spain. Wonderful.
Okay, well, I think that's the end of the questions. That's Michelle. You were going to say something. I don't know. Were you going to say something?
No, absolutely. Just thank you for the questions. There was one question, Sharon, and maybe, I know we're running out of time, but just how did you publish?
Ah, okay. All right. So, you know, there are these things called the Camino angels. They send you stuff, you know, like acts of kindness, things that when you really need something. And the Camino angel smiled on me one late night while Googling, because I thought, all right, I will self-publish because it's a better route to go. Then you see, okay, you can watch a video clip. You can see, okay, Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, which is the Amazon part of publishing. You can go on there, and it's really easy to do it. And you can just watch like a zillion tutorials, and I'm thinking, oh, good Lord, no, I can't do this. You know, there's a formatting piece, and I'm not going to get it right, and I don't want to, you know. So it was just like, stick to what you can do. And this was the sense for me, don't try and do it all. So I was thinking, I mean, the I Love Parkhurst page didn't help here. Anybody can assist, you know, with self-publishing, but it didn't come right there. But I found somebody online called Philippa Mitchell, and she's been a really valuable part of this journey. And she had a lot of stuff on her website, and she said, I can help you. So, and she had other people who she'd worked a lot with, who she had a lot of confidence in. So it was like, oh my goodness, that was a Camino angel moment, finding Philippa. And she did, she's done all the e-side of it. So, you know, the uploading onto various electronic platforms, getting it into print. There's a huge back end. And I just knew that I didn't have the competence to do that part. And I didn't want it to be taken away from. So it was self-publishing, but it was very much assisted self-publishing.
So we had a question about how people can get hold of the book. So I think maybe I should just tell everybody now. If you're outside of South Africa, it is available on Amazon in Kindle form and at the moment, and also in paperback on Amazon. But currently it's only in Amazon US and Canada stores and Barnes & Noble in the US. But paperback is coming to the other Amazon stores. For example, the UK and Australia. You just have to check if you're from that part of the world. Just check those sites and see if it's there. But if you're in South Africa, we do have print copies available in Cape Town and Johannesburg. And if you're in other parts of South Africa, we can courier them. And if you would like a print copy, please send Sharon an email. And then if you are reading on Kindle, I saw earlier somebody said she couldn't wait and she just downloaded the Kindle now while we were talking, which is great. But if you are reading it on Kindle, please, would you complete a review? That would be really great if you could do that. That would be very helpful. So that's it from me. Sharon will complete the evening.
Okay, having the last word. So from my side, I'd just like to say to everybody who's come, thank you so much for being part of this journey, part of this conversation. You don't know it, but it's a conversation that we've been having already for a few days. So thank you so much for coming along. It's been wonderful. You know, what this has brought in a real Camino way. It's about connecting and connection, connecting with people you know and you don't know. So for those of you who I don't know, wonderful to meet you and have had you along in this conversation. Thank you so much to Syl. Syl, it's been a joy. It really has, and I've loved the interaction that we've had over the last few months. Michelle, thank you so much for handling the tech. Anybody who does anything online knows you need a good tech person, and sorry I did jump in every now and then. And then, of course, to Dee, thank you so much for everything that you've brought in every step along this process. And yeah, it's been wonderful. So I'm very grateful to everybody for coming along this evening and sharing in this journey. To Sharon and Gavi and Pam, thank you for your wonderful words. They were very encouraging along the way. And yeah, for those of you who haven't got onto the path yet, onto the worded path, thank you for stepping in, if you're going to step in with me. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I have enjoyed being in this process. So muchas gracias a todos, and buen camino in whatever camino you are walking.
We'd like to try and do screenshots, but I don't think my thing is working. So could we just ask everyone just to put their camera on for 1 second? I'm just going to literally photograph the computer. So is everyone on this page? Let's just see. Okay, there's 3 pages, I think. So there's only a couple people who are not showing their video at the moment. Maybe you can't. Okay. That's one. Thank you. Let's get the second page. Is everyone there? Oh, great. Smile for the birdie. Lovely. Okay, page 3. Everybody there? Not everyone, but we'll go.
Page 3 has got a lot of cameras off.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. Okay, not everyone has a camera available, but that's fine. Okay, we got a lot of names if we didn't get the picture.
All right, so thank you very much, everyone, and yeah, we'll leave it there.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Everyone, well done.
Well done, Sharon. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Hip hip hooray.
You can all unmute yourself and go hippo hooray.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Well done, Sharon.
Thank you.
Sharon.
Well done.
Well done, Sharon.
Well done.
Congratulations.
Bye, Delia.
Bye, Delia.
Bye, Sharon.
Bye.
Mm.
Bye.
Oh, fantastic.
Wait. That was it. Show me. Hey, it says it.
Bye.
Some people don't want to go.
Well, they don't have to go. Whoever's there and they want to say, they can unmute themselves.
You can stop the recording now, maybe.
Yeah. Good point.